Release That Witch. Audiobook, Part 29.
Chapter 393, New Boats Entering the Water. A crowd of people surrounded the temporary shipyard by the Redwater River. Everyone knew that in the wooden shed some strange boats were being built with shells resembling a huge bathtub. The boats were made of gray cement, a material which was no different from rock after it set. If they were put into water, there would be no trace of it except a splash. The craftsmen who worked here gave it a proper name, bathtub ship. Today would be when the first two boats went into the water. The crowd was composed of two kinds of people. One kind was civilians who had just joined border town and were curious about the event or felt it unconceivable, so they came to check it out with great skepticism. A great number of them were fishermen and sailors from the Eastern and Southern Territory. The other kind was locals who were used to His Highness' various miracles. They had heard of the previous little town and gathered here in the drifting snow to see His Highness. Kakuzim was among the first kind. When Kakuzim first saw the notice about the test of new boats and the new recruiting order of His Highness, he said he would come and watch the boats entering water no matter what. Vader had no choice but to ask His Excellency Carter for a leave and accompany Kakuzim. Considering Kakuzim wasn't familiar with this area, and the ground was covered with thick snow, Vader was worried about his going to a crowded place all by himself. If he fell down in a push-squeeze situation, it could mean incurable injury. "You're underestimating me, child." The old man waved his hand, suggesting Vader not to follow him. "I've been through winds and waves. Although I'm getting old, my physical condition isn't much worse than yours." Sure, Vader said carelessly. "I've already asked for leave, so any rejection is too late. I just don't quite get it. Why do you have to come and see this thing enter water? It's only a boat." "But you said it was made out of gray stone." Kakuzim shook his head. "Have we entered a time when even a bathtub-sized stone could float on water? It's my own fault." Vader thought. "I shouldn't have mentioned the notice at the square. Maybe His Highness was only bragging. Probably it's a wooden boat with a few parts made out of that cement. That's even more unlikely." The old man insisted. "Think about it. When was this wooden shed built?" "About over a month ago." "That's right. It's before when you were recruited as a policeman. When we first moved to the inner city here, this place was still empty." His beard shook. "It took a month to build the shed, so it means building the first boat only took half a month." "Ah, isn't that normal?" Vader was bewildered. "Of course not." Kakuzim exclaimed, "In the name of the sea god. I've never seen a boat that could be built within half a month. It's not a matter of size. For any type of sailing boat, processing keels alone would take more than a month, because you must wait until the wood is totally dried to then curve it with steam. This is a very complicated process that can't be completed in a short time." Vader was very surprised. "Why are you so familiar with shipbuilding?" "I was once a captain, child." The old man sighed. "When I was young, I used to sail with lots of goods through Sea Windshire and the port of Clearwater, and I reached as far as the Kingdom of Dawn and Fjord Islands. Then something happened, and now I'm here." "You've never told me any of that," Vader said with his eyes wide open. "You've never asked, child." Kakuzim shrugged. "All right." Vader shifted his attention to the shipyard. "So what you're really curious about is the technique His Highness used to build a sailing boat within half a month. Any captain would be curious." Kakuzim touched his beard. "If His Highness isn't lying, do you know what this means? 1 or 2 years later, his fleet will be sailing through all the rivers in the Kingdom of Grey Castle." Vader's heart twitched. "You don't intend to?" Kakuzim smiled. "I can't always eat your oatmeal. His Highness never lies." Someone nearby suddenly said. "Besides, that's not a sailing boat." Vader turned around to find that the speaker was a young man. Judging from his accent, he seemed to be a local Western region resident. "Not a sailing boat?" "No. It can travel without wind and at a speed faster than any sailing boat." The young man continued proudly, "Have you seen the steam engines in the mines? They can easily drag a basket of ore out of the mine hole. These cement boats are driven by those steam engines, and according to His Highness, they're actually steam-powered boats." "Traveling without sails?" Kakuzum said with disbelief. "Kid, that's nonsense. If a boat has no sails, it can only rely on paddling. Such a boat can never travel faster than a sailing boat. Besides, they're not in the water yet. If you haven't seen it, how can you be sure that they can move in water at all?" "Of course I've seen it," said the young man. "You must be newcomers from other territories, so it's normal if you don't understand. In the summertime, I modified a steam-powered boat for a caravan across the strait. But the boat was still wooden and not as durable as those cement ones." Vader intended to argue more, but that young man's eyes suddenly brightened up. Pointing to the shipyard, that man said, "Look over there. His Highness is here." Cheers and applause erupted from the crowd as all the people raised their hands to greet the Lord. Prince Roland went up to the temporary wooden platform next to the shipyard, conveyed a few congratulatory words, and then announced the entering water of the new boats. With rhythmic chants, the workers opened the wooden shed towards the Redwater River. A boat with a 40-meter-long gray hull slid down the river levee, collecting snow, and plunged into the icy water. Vader felt his heart jump into his throat. He thought this thing would sink directly to the river bottom, but to his surprise, after the rear half entered the water, the front lifted up and splashed with foam. The crowd burst into applause again. "Gee, it really floats up." Kakuzum froze in shock. "But is it really made of stone?" Vader had the same question. The surface of the bathtub ship looked so smooth, as if it was made of finely polished granite slabs seamlessly connected together. The whole of the boat looked like one whole piece. The boat cabin was shallow and it had no decks, so there were no places for the crew to sleep. Furthermore, the boat bottom was too flat for masts to be fixed on. As its nickname indicated, this thing looked exactly like a bathtub. Either way, His Highness had indeed managed to produce the boat within half a month. Vader looked at Kakuzum and found his eyes glinting with excitement. "I want to apply to be captain," said the old man. Chapter 394, The Seat of a Navy. Roland watched the second cement boat slip into the water with satisfaction as his subjects cheered loudly. The two cement boats looked simple in terms of structure, but they were actually much better than previous models, namely the little town. A framework of dense steel reinforcement had been added to the internal structure, and the quality of the cement had improved tremendously. The overall strength of the boat was thus several times greater than the little town. To expedite the shipbuilding process, Roland reserved slots and ports for steam engines, transmission mechanisms and paddle wheels when he designed the hull. This way, laborers only needed to weld bolts into the metal components. They could quickly build the boat putting pieces together like a jigsaw puzzle. Meanwhile, the mold was now made of iron rather than temporary masonry. This change not only guaranteed a high density of the poured concrete, thereby improving the boat's waterproof performance, but it also ensured that each boat was almost exactly the same. This helped to avoid errors when installing the power system. In order to create a complete design of the mold, Roland had scrapped at least 7 or 8 testing samples. Fortunately, cement was no longer scarce these days. Steam engines had replaced human labor, from stone grinding all the way to kiln feeding. It was the only large-scale industrial project that did not rely on witches' abilities in border town. With ample materials, reliable molds and skilled laborers, the only factor that limited the production of hulls was the hardening rate of cement. However, with the help of paper's reaction acceleration ability, it only took 1 day, rather than the original 1 to 2 months, to launch a cement boat. In other words, the shipyard could launch an unpowered vessel every 2 or 3 days if Roland wished to. If the speed of steam engine manufacturing could catch up with that of crew training, he would most likely develop a huge shipping fleet in a short period of time and fill the Redwater River with his own cement boats. They would look like dumplings in boiling water. That was the appeal of industrialization. Now that the hull had been completed, the next step would be the installation of power units. The mechanical equipment was pretty much the same as those on the modified boats of the Chamber of Commerce at Crescent Moon Bay. The craftsman already had practical experience, so he didn't need to worry about it. I don't understand. Why did you tell these things to subjects? Nightingale asked. To advertise the national power. Roland smiled faintly. I'm sorry. I mean to behold the tremendous changes the town has gone through. The prince stroked his chin. You probably never expected a boat made of stones could float on the water before seeing the little town. My subjects think the same way. After realizing what is impossible, they'll have a greater sense of township. It's a comprehensive upgrading in mentality, which can even turn into a belief that there's nothing they can't achieve. I don't quite understand. Nightingale sounded a little confused. You just see it as a means of propaganda, and that will do, Roland smiled and said. In this era, the nobilities only celebrated with civilians for big events or ceremonies, both of which were almost entirely noble affairs. If it weren't for the free food, many civilians wouldn't attend. Nevertheless, the cement boats were the combined work of hundreds of laborers, and they were part of the festivities. After witnessing constant miracles, members of the territory would gradually develop their confidence and sense of identity, collectively referred to as superpower mentality in later generations. Once a territory had become powerful and prosperous, the mentality of its subjects would inevitably experience positive changes. A week later, Roland met over 20 townies who had applied for the captain's position in the castle's hall. He was quite surprised at first when Berev reported the number, as he did not expect there would be so many top-notch talents among the refugees taken in by this town. When he read the detailed report, that he couldn't help laughing. There were quite a few fishermen who operated rafts and small fishing boats, even some boatmen who made a living providing ferry services. They could indeed be regarded as captain, in a sense. Among all the applicants, there were only 3 people with experience operating sloops on the inland river, one of whom claimed that he used to work as a commander for a merchant fleet, and had earned a living on the sea for a long time. Roland thought for a while, then decided to recruit all 20 people. Steam-powered boats belonged to a completely different system from that of sailboats, and were also operated in a distinct way. Even an experienced captain would not necessarily learn the operation of paddle steamers that fast. Besides, he knew nothing about operating a boat himself, so it would be better for them to learn as they went. Since he was starting from scratch, he needed to be resolute and have the courage to explore. I've reviewed your applications. Roland glanced at the group of people kneeling in the hall. Today I've summoned you here to tell you that you've passed the preliminary assessment, and have gloriously become the first group of captain interns. Please rise. Yes. Your Highness. All the people rose gingerly, exchanging looks with one another. They looked rather confused about the term captain intern. The prince took the initiative to explain. Being an intern means you haven't been officially hired yet. You'll only get half of the salary stated in the post until you are officially on board, 10 silver royals a month. The first 2 months will be the learning period, during which you will get yourselves familiarized with the performance, operation method and procedures of the new boat. The 3rd month will be the trial period, during which you'll be assessed in terms of your learning ability. Only the qualified ones will be promoted to official captains and paid full salary. Those who aren't willing to accept these terms can leave now. Nobody in the group moved. After a while, an old man suddenly spoke. Your Highness, who'll teach us and who'll assess us to see if we're qualified? Roland cast him a glance with great interest. He was the one who claimed to be an experienced fleet commander. His name appeared to be Fearsome. If Roland remembered correctly, he was a relative of the policeman from the assassination case 2 months ago. Judging from the old man's tone, Roland could tell that he didn't think there was anyone qualified to teach him how to operate a ship. Indeed, there was none. The teachers will be yourselves, the prince nodded and said. These words caused a stir among the group. Your Highness, what does that mean? Fearsome asked, confused. How much do you know about steam engines? Roland replied with a question. As he expected, not a single person could answer. The steam-powered boat is brand new in every aspect. Your past experience will not actually help much, therefore you need to explore and find a way yourselves. Of course, I'll send the craftsmen from the steam engine plant to assist you in familiarizing yourselves with machines. He paused for a little bit and said, the assessment approach is very simple. Those who are able to operate the boat with a group of sailors and complete a transportation task will be regarded as qualified. Although the saying it takes 10 years to build an army and 100 years a navy was exaggerating slightly, it did indicate the difficulty in building a navy. If this group of people could master the operation of the steam-powered boat, they could for sure foster a large group of capable crews for the western region. These crews could be directly employed to build steam-powered shallow-water gunboats later. He wondered what kind of navy it would turn out to be. Chapter 395, Deep Down Inside the Winter Forest. Leaf passed through the branches and foliage looking for Lightning and Maggie. In actuality, she was not exactly passing through them, but moving just her vision, her body was integrated into the thick forest. It was an amazing feeling. She felt like a bird, except a bird would fall to the ground if it wasn't flapping its wings, whereas she wouldn't. As long as she maintained this form, she could cross from one end of the fusion forest to the other instantly. Of course, compared to the entire misty forest, the range that Leaf could cover now was just a drop in the ocean. Ever since her ability had evolved, she had longed to experience the misty forest to the west of the town. If she could control this vast forest, it would be of great help to His Highness, whether it was fighting against demonic beasts or collecting goods and materials. There wasn't much she could do for His Highness in return. Apart from improving crops, this was the only thing she could do, so she wanted to be good at it. Compared to the castle's back garden, this was a real forest. Its complexity was far greater than the ecosphere of the castle's olive trees and grapevines, and beyond comparison. There were numerous creatures hiding beneath every inch of earth. Looking down along the roots of plants, she could sense dormant animals, squirming insects, and decaying remains, along with tiny babbling streams. To prevent losing herself, Leaf expanded her territory with great caution, starting from the city wall on the west, extending little by little each day. Once she completely adapted to an environment, she would then try to control a new plot of forest land. At this rate, she could cover the entire misty forest within 2 or 3 years. Shortly after, Leaf found 2 people hunting in the forest. If she had been walking in the snow instead of flying above the treetops, she would have noticed them sooner. "I found some prey," said Leaf, shaking the branches. "Ah." Lightning patted her chest after a shudder. "You scared me." "Coo, coo." Maggie nodded repeatedly. "Sorry." Leaf revealed herself through a tree trunk, just like a twig growing out of the branches. "Is this better?" "Well, at least I'm not talking to a ghost." Lightning landed quietly. "You can appear anywhere in the forest at will?" She nodded. "As long as it falls in the territory that's under my control." Maggie landed right on Leaf's back, walked a few steps back and forth, and even pecked where her body and the trunk joined. "You've even grown into a tree, coo." Feeling her back tickling, Leaf couldn't help laughing. "Because this is my ability," said she. "It feels a little weird, coo." "How can you call someone else weird?" "You've turned yourself into a giant demon bird." Lightning rolled her eyes and looked at Leaf. "Where's the prey?" "Follow me," she said, turning her head. Leaf couldn't sustain a human form while moving. Instead, she made vines grow up from the ground to lead Lightning and Maggie on the way. "What kind of prey?" Lightning asked. "A big boar that ran out of the depths of the forest," she replied. "Do you really want to catch it yourself?" "I can just tie it up with grapevines and throw it at the foot of the city wall." "Of course. Explorers seek more than just results." The little girl raised her head. "The process is sometimes more memorable than the outcome." "I'm good as long as there's meat to eat, coo." Leaf could not help smiling. The 2 of them had already become frequent visitors to the misty forest before she had integrated into it. They hunted in the forest to practice their magic powers, and Maggie would carry all of the prey they caught back to the castle. Half of the meat on the table these days was provided by them. "Look, there it is," said Leaf. There was a huge boar squatting down by the stream, lapping up the cold water. With large, sharp tusks at the side of its snout, and a raised mane that was almost finger-length, it appeared to be a tough enemy. Hunters would normally stay away when coming across such an animal, but it was just a feast in the witch's eyes. "I'm ready," said Lightning, who pulled out her dagger. "No gun?" Leaf asked in surprise. "That would be too boring." She wiped her nose with great confidence and rushed straight toward the target. "Good luck, Coo!" The little girl's figure, like a streak of golden light, sprang onto the head of the boar from behind. As she rose, the boar shook its head fiercely, bursting out a high-pitched scream. She missed it? No. Leaf noticed one of the boar's eyes had become a bloody gash. It seemed that Lightning was planning to take advantage of her flexibility and first eliminate the threat of counterattacks from the enemy, and then exhaust it through a battle of attrition. The boar was as clumsy as a stone facing Lightning's attack from the sky. It soon fell to the snow without the strength to resist. She whistled. "How was that?" "Good job," Leaf said. She tied the boar's rear legs with vines and hung it up. "First let's bleed it out. His Highness says meat without any traces of blood is tastier." Purr. Maggie's mouth was watery. "It's gonna be a big meal tonight, Coo." Wait. Leaf suddenly sensed there were other creatures entering the forest. She looked toward the edge of the controlled area and saw 2 gray wolves approaching. She frowned. Something was wrong. This type of animal usually lived deep within the forest and wouldn't normally come so close to border town, even in the winter. She was just debating whether she should tell Lightning when a familiar figure suddenly appeared before her eyes. Leaf felt all her hair stand up as she remembered the tragic battle she had experienced in the barbarian land. Demons. She saw 2 demons slowly walking in the direction of the city wall. There were no magic stones on their arms, nor spears on their back, so they weren't carrying any weapons. However, Leaf noticed that they both wore a black iron glove, the same weapon that had killed Red Light. Why would demons come here? With great horror and uneasiness, she turned to Lightning and said, "Get out of here, quick. Demons are coming." "What?" Both of them were slightly startled. Leaf briefly told them what she saw and urged them on. "Hurry up. They don't have a mount and can't catch up. I'll come later." To her surprise, Lightning hesitated for a moment and then shook her head, saying, "I'm staying here to fight them." Fight? Leaf was stunned and asked, "Why? If I run away from the enemy now, how can I defeat them in the future?" The little girl took a deep breath, pulled the gun from her waist and said, "My father told me to get up from where you fall. I won't run away anymore." Chapter 396, The Fierce Battle. The explorers will never be afraid of the adventures, but they will definitely not take an adventure recklessly. Demons are not that horrible because they can also be killed. And they have a huge weakness: they can't survive without red mist. Leaf once used the crossbow bolts to kill a trapped demon. Nightingale managed to kill the enemy under a very unfavorable circumstance. Lightning secretly cheered for herself and she believed that she could also make it. "We should first report this to His Highness," Leaf said hurriedly. "Comparing with us, both Nightingale and Ashes are much more experienced in fighting the demons. But the demons may have already left by the time they reach here." Lightning checked the pistol's cartridge to ensure that it was filled with bullets and said, "By letting such dangerous enemies wandering around the border, we'll face much more serious risks. I can stay and keep an eye on them." "What if they walk out of your control area?" the little girl insisted and continued, "and if you try to stop them, you'll end up exposing yourself. 3 of us might as well work together." Leaf relapsed into silence. She seemed to be persuaded. "Cuckoo!" Maggie stood on top of Lightning and flutered her wings. "All right," she scratched the pigeon's neck and said, "we'll each take care of a demon." What did she just say? Leaf asked. Lightning pouted and said, "She said she wants to break the head of the enemy with her claws and pound the flesh into a meat pie with her wings. Finally, she will toast it in the fire to find out how it may taste like." "She just said coup twice," the latter questioned. "It's basically what it means." The little girl nodded earnestly. An excellent explorer is not only extraordinarily brave but also has the ability to lead the entire team, helping them to relax when they are nervous and keeping them when they are over-relaxed. "I'll try my best to follow your words, Father." Lightning shook her wrist and the cartridge was closed. Trying not to look nervous, she pretended to look calm and said, "How far are they away from here?" "About 300 meters away from our right." Leaf answered. "I should have seen the enemies if I was not blocked by the woods." She was thinking that she definitely had the advantage of taking the first shot, and the pistol obviously outperforms the magic stone due to its long range. "You can trap the demons with vines, right? Just like last time at the barbarian land." "I believe I should be able to trap them for a short period of time." "Okay. We can attack from the sky." Lightning said, "It's the last direction the enemies will notice. They will temporarily focus on the vines only. We can end this fight in seconds." "I understand." The leaves shook slightly. Perhaps because there were too many related horrible memories when Leaf was in the Witch Cooperation Association. But Lightning had no time to worry about this at this moment. She would probably lose her courage if they kept waiting. After all, she and Maggie were the ones that fight the demons. But Leaf would hide in the woods. She wouldn't be hurt no matter how the demons attacked the vines. "Let's get started." Lightning flew right into the sky. "Coo!" Pigeon was following right behind her. The forest instantly looked like green and white patches below her. The little girl put on the goggles given by His Highness and she felt braver right away. "They're over there." Maggie transformed into a gray-tailed hawk and found the targets just after seconds of searching. With her hawk eye, she would never even miss a running rabbit in the snow. Lightning took a deep breath. Thunder and His Highness flashed upon her mind. She shook her head and made her mind clear. With her hands holding the pistol grip, she said, "I'll take care of the left side and you, the right side. When we are halfway through, then you turn into the giant winged bird again. Leave it to me." "Coo! Go!" the little girl shouted and then began to dive in. With the cold wind roaring through her cheeks, her ears were hurting. She moved her head a little bit into the scarf. Thinking of the shooting method she learned from Nightingale, she pointed the flintlock forward. The effective range of the bullet was about 100 meters, but it was clear that she should move as close as possible to make sure the target would be hit. Assuming that Leaf's information was right, the demon's iron gloves must be inlaid with the electrical magic stone. Their magic range was around 5 meters, almost the same as the witches. It was the best choice to shoot them at a distance of 7 to 8 meters. The enemy's figures became clearer. And she could see their horrible headgears and scarlet masks. Suddenly, a demon stopped to look up and roared towards them. "Are we exposed?" Lightning's heart sank. Why does the enemy act as if they can perceive her? At the same time, countless vines rose around the demons. They twined the enemy's legs and continued to climb upwards. Finally, the enemies were totally twined by the vines. A white flash shined from Maggie's body and she turned into a huge monster instantly, diving and screaming at the same time to show her strength. Whatever. Lightning grit her teeth and decided to speed up again. When she was about 50 meters from the enemies, she took a sudden turn and rushed down to the back of the enemies like a shooting star. She could only hit the heads of the enemies if she shot straight down, while she could expand the shooting area if she shot horizontally. And Nightingale had also repeated many times that she should fire on the widest body part of the enemy. The demon struggled to lift his right hand, twined by the vines. Dazzling light burst out from his iron gloves. Almost at the same time, Lightning pushed down the trigger. A huge boom suddenly went through the sky above of the forest. As she expected, the attack range of the magic stone was really limited. The blue and white arc light just existed for a very short time. With the sounds of gunshots, blood mist burst out from the back of the demon. The bullets not only went through its body but also smashed the gas bottle on its back. However, Maggie was not as lucky. Another demon hit her body with its lightning. Sparks burst out from her body and her mighty screams turned into terrible ones. She curled up her wings and then heavily fell down on the demon, kicking up large snowflakes. When they hit the ground, Lightning felt the ground shaking. It was probably because of the severe impact. The demon's gas bottle was smashed and red mist was overflowing from under the giant bird. The little girl was very anxious and worried, looking at this. Leaf reacted immediately. Dozens of vines gathered on Maggie's body and moved her away from the demon. The giant bird rolled in the snow twice and lay still with her face on the ground. Lightning rushed towards her. She held her giant head, shaking it and said, "Wake up, Maggie. Are you all right?" "Coo. I feel numb." Maggie opened her eyes. She transformed back into her human shape with her magic power faded off and said, "What just happened?" Lightning checked every part of her body, feeling relaxed after confirming her safety and said, "I'm glad that you're all right." It seemed that in the shape of the flying giant monster, Maggie would not be hurt by the blood mist and she could endure more harms with her giant body. The electric arc just knocked her out for a moment, and there was a demon right below her as a cushion when she was falling down. It was a frightening attack, but she was barely harmed. This could be the best out of the worst. Both of them are dead. Leaf moved half of her body from the trunk, examining two lifeless demons, and said, "What should we do next?" "Bring the bodies back," Lightning said. "His Highness should know how to deal with them." Chapter 397, A Close Study. Hearing the news, Roland was shocked. Rushing after Leaf, he couldn't even attempt to question her further until they had reached the castle's backyard. As he stepped out of the castle, he saw Lightning dragging two dead demons off of Maggie's back. "Your Highness, look, we won." Seeing the prince, the little girl jumped up straight into Roland's arms. "We defeated the demons. No one is hurt?" Roland asked. "No, everyone is fine." Lightning looked up, her eyes sparkling with eagerness and hopes of praise. Her metaphorical tail wagging was with excitement. Roland sighed. Seeing her look of sheer joy made him reluctant to point fingers. So, instead of asking why no one had reported seeing the demons, he decided to say, "I am glad there are no injuries, but what just happened exactly?" The three witches all replied at once. Roland had to listen for a long while before he was able to piece together what had happened. The way they told it made the fight seem easy, and it was over quickly. However, there were many moments that could have ended in disaster. If Maggie had not been able to withstand the impact of the electric arc, or if the demons had been able to shake off Leaf's restraints, the consequences would have been unthinkable. "Don't you ever do anything like that again." Nightingale couldn't keep quiet any longer. Stepping from the cloak of her mist as she said, "To fight with demons is to leave us. With Sylvie, there is no escape." "But we won," Lightning said while pouting. "I call it dumb luck." "Before the fight, did you know Maggie was going to be hit?" Nightingale countered sternly, "I taught you to use a gun so you could protect your sisters and self. Instead, you dragged them into danger." "No." Lightning dropped her head in contrition and said, "I was wrong." "And you," Nightingale said, turning to Maggie, "you know you are obligated to fly back and report, and yet you chose to stay? If you make a mistake like this again, I won't give you any more dried fish." Sigh. Maggie's head drooped, too. Nightingale is indeed the toughest witch fighter Border Town has to offer, Roland thought, giving Nightingale a glance of approval. Then he said, "Well, as long as it was just this once. Go and bring Tilly and Agatha to me. It's time for us to examine our new trophies." In the castle's basement, on the cold stone floor lay two bodies stripped bare, their shabby clothes and meager belongings stacked beside them. "Are they demons?" Tilly inquired while covering her nose, hoping to block the fetid stench. "They don't look stronger than ordinary people," Ashes said, twitching her mouth. Agatha looked glum. Don't underestimate them. Any demon is a tough opponent, with or without magic powers. A senior demon or even a transcendent would wear a god's stone of retaliation, she stated, frowning. Looking over at Roland, she then said, "They really showed up near the town?" "Pretty much," Leaf said. "They were less than 2 miles from the town's city walls." Roland nodded his response while looking at the bodies displayed before him. The demon bodies were tall, over 6 feet, they had strong, powerful limbs, and their skin was a shade of light blue. One of the bodies appeared to be severely mutilated, and the organs could be seen peeking from its collapsed chest. It looked almost as if it had been crushed by a steamroller. This, in combination with Lightning's narrative, Roland could almost see the great impact that had caused the damage. The other body was in better shape, and the only visible damage was 2 puncture wounds. He could still see the demon's blue blood trickling from the perfect holes. Of the 4 shots Lightning took, only 2 had hit their mark. Fortunately, they were fatal. The blue blood makes sense since demons don't need oxygen like humans, they have no need for hemoglobin. Technically, a demon's blood could be any color. And their massive bone structure was also logical. It was necessary to support their height and powerful frame. What is confusing is their striking resemblance to humans, minus the reproductive organs. How do they reproduce with their own kind? Roland asked Agatha curiously. Don't they have gender differences? To my knowledge, no, they don't, she said, shaking her head. It has been an unsolved mystery for me. No one can get close enough to Red Mist Tower to find out. There is speculation that they were born in the tower, formed by the mist. However, the Quest Society rejected the notion, claiming that the demons were regenerating and every battle was with the same demons, in different forms. They called it the regeneration upgrade phenomenon. Regeneration upgrade phenomenon? Ashes frowned and asked, "What is that?" Some of the demons that were severely wounded by our witches would again appear on the battlefield. Based on the pattern of the wounds, we could tell they were the ones that had been beaten previously, even though their forms had changed. This implies that senior demons were not born but instead likely evolved through battle. Once they reached their full upgrade, their forms would change. Agatha explained. Well, the magic stone technology by itself is worrying enough, and now the enemy seems to have the ability to upgrade from battle. No wonder they defeated the human beings in the last 2 battles of the Divine Will. Roland squatted down to have a closer look at the demon's stacked clothing and belongings. Fortunately, it did not look as if they had anything that could be considered advanced. Their belongings actually looked a little outdated. The clothing was a mix of animal skins and ugly primitive weaves. The ferocious masks were actual skulls from demonic hybrids, clearly not manufactured. Even the transparent portion embedded into the eyes of the skulls were no more than a polished crystal, tinged and clouded from the red mist. While wearing the masks, they would only be able to see a bloody red shadow. How did they learn to fight with something like this? In addition to the clothes and masks, there were a dozen black slates and a few magic stones. Has the Quest Society ever seen anything like this? Roland asked Agatha as he laid out the slates, side by side. They made him think of the towering buildings in the red mist. A few of the slates had distorted red marking, while others had nothing you could see with the naked eye. That's the way demons keep records, she nodded while answering, and they record with magic too, so we can't decode their meaning at all. Maybe the way they think is completely different, Tilly suggested. That's a possibility, Roland agreed. And what about the magic stones? Stones of perception, stones of pathfinding, and stones of marking, Agatha answered while glancing over them, nothing precious. They are only basic equipment for Scout Devils. Scout Devil. Roland felt a dull pain in his head as he asked Agatha, does it mean that the demons have already noticed this place, and have started to send their scouts to the town? Chapter 398, Puzzle. Don't bet on it. Agatha shook her head. Based on what we experienced during the second battle of the Divine Will, if they wanted to investigate a human town, they wouldn't act this carelessly. What does that mean? Asked Prince Roland. To make sure information makes it back to Red Mist Tower, this type of reconnaissance would be conducted by 2 or even 3 platoons. Quite often the soldiers rode demonic beasts and acted as a unit, under the protection of spear-wielding demons, she said slowly. In order to destroy the investigative platoons, the Union would often send out flying witches to block their rear, and they would send out twice as many blessed warriors as there were demons for a head-on assault. In the last war, the investigative platoons just kept growing in numbers, and even fearsome demons and flying demons joined the recon. It would be odd for them to send out only 2 ordinary mad demons to investigate. Not to mention they were unprotected and really poorly equipped. Maybe they don't think it is necessary to send large platoons to investigate Border Town and that only 2 ordinary demons would be enough? Ashes suggested. That doesn't make sense, Agatha said after a thought, refuting Ash's theory. During the time of the Union, every town near the border, no matter how small it was, would be protected by witches. Since the demons couldn't possibly know of the changes that have happened in the human world over the past 400 years, they would have been more cautious and investigated like they had done previously. So you think they were not here deliberately but found the town by accident? Roland couldn't help but relax at the thought. Very likely, she frowned and seemed to be pondering something. The demons probably had no idea the town was even here, but it's more likely they were scouting the area surrounding their camps. It's unlikely they thought they would meet anything more than a few demonic beasts. That would explain why they only carried stones of lightning for protection, instead of stones of unifying strength which manifest spears that cannot be used continuously. Wait. Roland was startled. You think there are demon camps nearby? Of course. What other reason would cause them to be out this way? Agatha stated simply. They must have established strongholds on the fertile plains and from there spread into the barbarian land. Oh, I forgot it is now called the 4 Kingdoms. Ah, hell, that's a big problem. If the enemies establish themselves under my nose, how will the town survive? The prince worried to himself. He then asked aloud, eyebrows raised, are they like the camps behind the snow-capped mountains? Yes, they are pretty much the same. During the war, there were several storage towers to store the red mist at each outpost. Each tower was guarded by 100 to 200 demons. Agatha stated while nodding, considering the Bloody Moon hasn't arrived yet, it is not likely that they have built a new towering stronghold on the fertile plains. Since it isn't easy to transport red mist, the camps are probably small. What are you going to do? Tilly asked, looking at Roland with concern. First, we find the camp, see if it really exists, he paused and said, then, we wipe it out. A decisive choice, said Ashes, smiling. That's indeed a lord's decision, and don't worry, we'll help too. If Agatha is right, before the 3rd Battle of the Divine will officially starts, demons are unable to spread their influences to the whole fertile plains. Given that, once the camp near the western region is eliminated, there will be at least a few years' peace during which demons won't have the ability to strike back even if they wanted to. However, this plan could be risky due to the fact it would inform the demons that there are humans who live to the east of the misty forest and reveal that they have the ability to take the initiative and attack the demons. If I leave the camp alone, it'll expand and cause me even bigger trouble. First, they'll probably send out more demons here after they realize those 2 scout demons are missing, and after that, it is just a matter of time before they find the town. Second, if it is a larger camp, the demons will just increase in number and attack the town whenever they desire. Even after the months of demons has passed, which is very dangerous. How can I expect the First Army to complete their spring plan of attack if they are trapped in the town, busy constantly fighting demons? When Roland returned to his office, he immediately sent for Lightning and Maggie and quickly gave them a task. Please remember that you are never to act without authorization. Once you find the camp, fly back here immediately. Don't engage the demons in battle, they may have flying beasts on hand. Your first priority is to keep yourselves safe. Yes. Cool. He paused before adding, if you do find the camp, you'll be rewarded with ice cream bread for dessert after every meal this coming week. Maggie stretched her neck and said, you can count on us, Koo. 3 days later, Roland received Lightning's report. Out in the barbarian land, there was a place suspected to be a demon's town. It was located about 130 kilometers away from border town. After roughly mapping out its position, he noticed that it was right in front of the route that the Witch Cooperation Association used to follow. This was less than 10 kilometers away from the place where the association was attacked by demons. "What do you mean when you say suspected?" he asked Lightning. "Have you not seen their black stone towers?" The little girl shook her head, her expression perplexed. "I have only seen what appears to be wreckage." "What?" "What I saw was crushed black stone, broken fences pieces, and a huge hole in the ground," she continued while rubbing her forehead. "The place looks like the one where Agatha found the relic. I didn't track any demons though. After surveying the destruction, I flew back here immediately." "Another hole?" Roland was stunned. "Are there giant maggot-like beasts inside this hole too?" "Last time, there were maggot-like beasts with the relic and they devoured the stone tower's remains. This time, did they swallow the demon camp as well? Did I miss some important clue that links those two events?" He shook his head and pushed aside the puzzling pieces and asked, "Did you find anything else?" "No, the camp was deserted. There were no demons there," Lightning replied. "And no sparkling magic stones either, Coo," Maggie added. "I see." Roland mulled over the information he had been given and then quickly began to make arrangements. He looked over at the white-haired girl and said, "You take Nightingale and Soraya to the suspected campsite and get pictures of the scene. Then escort Nightingale and Sylvie there so they can check it out further." "Why not just let Soraya and Sylvie go there together?" asked Lightning. "Just in case the demons have flying beasts that Maggie can't get rid of," Roland explained briefly. "Nightingale can use her mist to help you escape. In any dangerous situation, you just get out of there as quickly as possible." Soraya's photo of the scene was soon placed in front of Roland. Just as Lightning had described, there was a massive crater in the ground, stretching 5 to 6 meters across, with broken debris scattered around its edge. The fringe of the hole looked almost like the earth and been churned from below. The snow and dirt were mixed, along with various pieces of the crushed black stone, and that was exactly how it looked, like it had been crushed by a massive creature. Sylvie's findings made him even more uneasy. The underground passage there led towards the snow-capped mountains, the same direction as the one relic they found in the misty forest. Both tunnels led to the same place. Chapter 399, Contact. In the basement of the palace, King's City, Kingdom of Grey Castle. Timothy sat on the throne with his cheek resting on his right hand. He watched impatiently as the candidates performed their assassination stunts. "How many fools have I watched since winter began? I must have been too lenient recently, to have allowed these clowns to perform." He sneezed and felt the dryness in his eyes. Ever since the Hall of Skydome was destroyed by snow powder, Timothy had moved the venue of the council meeting to the basement of the palace. After some renovation, including opening up several storage chambers, the total space was large enough to accommodate all of the council's ministers and nobles. Most importantly, this place was absolutely safe. There was only one entrance, and the magnificent palace was directly above. No amount of snow powder could disrupt matters in here. The only disadvantage was the lack of sunlight, and thus light had to be supplied using turpentine torches. The torches, which were placed on the surrounding walls, caused the air in the room to become abnormally dry and stuffy. Furthermore, the turpentine gave off a sweet yet foul smell which made Timothy feel drowsy. Whenever he thought about his fourth brother, Timothy would become furious and spiteful. Had it not been for the eyewitnesses who noticed that the attacks came from the sky, Timothy would probably still be building guard towers recklessly. After he realized that this method was completely ineffective, all he could do was to hold his meetings in this place for the time being. "Roland Wimbledon will surely pay for this. Your Highness." The voice of a candidate disrupted his thoughts. "Have a look. If that traitor Roland ever dares to appear in front of me, I'll accomplish the mission that you've entrusted to me." Timothy took a swift glance at the candidate. In a split second, the candidate landed 4 flying knives accurately on a barrel that was 20 steps away. "Is this the stunt that you mentioned?" "Indeed, Your Highness," he replied assuredly. "Frankly speaking, I was in this line of business previously. I've killed dozens of rats using this method. If I hide in a crowd, most of my targets won't even know where the knives are flying out from. How much do you want?" Timothy shifted his stiff body a little. "Just 25 gold royals," the candidate counted his fingers and said, "5 of which will be used to cover the cost of my journey and my disguise. I'll dress in a common and unattractive fashion in order to get closer to the traitor." "Knight Weimer." The king beckoned. "Yes, Your Highness." Steelheart Knight walked into the hall, brandishing his saber and shield. "Your Highness, what do you mean by this?" The candidate was startled. "If you defeat my knight, I'll give you your reward straight away." Timothy winked at Knight Weimer. The latter nodded his head. Then, he took off his head armor and walked towards the candidate. Wait, no, Your Highness, this won't do." The candidate flipped his body distressedly to dodge the knight's incoming slashes, and stammered, "I can't fight head-on." "Ah." The knight swiftly followed up with a vicious kick to his stomach, causing him to swallow the rest of his words. After rolling on the floor for a while, the candidate flimsily flung a flying knife at the knight, but it was easily deflected by the knight's shield. The knight stomped on the candidate's hand and, using his sword, sliced off half of the candidate's arm. Blood spilled onto the ground in a curved line. "My hand," the candidate cried in pain. He held on to the remainder of his right arm and coiled his body. "Firstly, the royal family isn't as dumb as your average target. Even that foolish brother of mine won't easily go near crowds. And secondly, if you can't even handle a knight, what makes you think you're able to assassinate a lord who's protected by many knights? I'm afraid that once you receive the 25 gold royals, you'll never be seen again." Timothy gestured with his hands. "Throw him out." Had it been a month or 2 ago, he would not even entertain this bunch of ignorant and greedy people. He had given a small sum of money to those whom he deemed to have a slight chance of succeeding, yet until now, Roland was still alive and kicking. It was probably because of this benevolent attitude that caused more and more people to come forward and declare that they could solve the problems created by the traitor, and the methods they proposed became increasingly absurd. There was even a fella who suggested using a tavern maid as the assassin, claiming that her technique was outstanding and that no man could refuse her service. Utter ignorance. Don't they know the difference between a normal female and a witch? It was already well publicized that Roland had raised and groomed several witches, so there was zero chance that Roland would fall for someone so cheap. Timothy let out a long sigh. By teaching these ignorant candidates a lesson, perhaps others will think twice about coming forth. Maybe it was a mistake to recruit an assassin from the citizenry. The only things that could defeat Roland are pills and snow powder. He swept a glance around the hall, and, seeing that there were no outsiders remaining, he asked the Prime Minister, "How's the progress of the development of the snow powder weapon?" According to successive intelligence gathered from Longsong Stronghold, the reason that border town miners were able to defeat the Duke's Knights and the Mad Militia was because they used an unusual snow powder weapon. It was, in all likelihood, a semi-closed iron pipe which made use of the force generated by the explosion of snow powder to propel a lead shot towards the target, similar to how a crossbow worked. Timothy was highly interested in this, and had immediately gathered the experienced blacksmiths of King's City to begin creating an imitation of this unique weapon. "Not ideal, Your Highness." Marquis Wyke shook his head. "The blacksmiths have created 10 or so prototypes of this weapon in accordance with the intelligence, but none of them have anywhere close to the alleged firepower. Only a few can penetrate a knight's breastplate within 10 steps, while all are inaccurate over 50 steps. 10 steps? Timothy frowned. Might as well aim at the face, no? At this rate, how are we going to stop the charging knights? Indeed, there may be some tricks we have yet to master. Another thing, even if we gather all of the city's blacksmiths and apprentices, we can at most produce 20 of these weapons per month, and there's no guarantee that every one of them will work." The Marquis sighed. Until today, there have been 4 cases of iron pipes exploding during training, and the guards are rather reluctant about training with this kind of snow powder weapon. Damn it. Border Town was several times poorer than King City, yet Roland was able to produce hundreds of iron pipes in one winter. He must have received the assistance of demons. Timothy angrily switched the topic. How about the pills? Hasn't the church replied to us yet? Yes, Your Highness. The Marquis responded. The high priest said that Holy City was busy fighting the invasion of the demonic beasts, and therefore temporarily unable to provide more pills of madness. He hoped that we could wait until after the months of demons to discuss things. I don't want to see the traitor remain peacefully in the castle of Western Region, not even one day longer. Looks like I have to personally write a letter to the Holy City of Hermes, Timothy thought spitefully. In the future, if they want to continue recruiting believers in the Kingdom of Grey Castle, they'll have to bring pills for exchange. Just as he was about to announce the end of the day's council meeting, the Minister for Diplomacy, Sir Bullet, suddenly walked up to him and said, Your Highness, messengers from the Kingdom of Dawn have arrived in King's City, and they wish to see you. Chapter 400, Alliance Agreement. According to the customary practice, the reception of messengers from other kingdoms should be conducted in the Hall of Skydome. However, it was only recently cleared of rubble from the collapsed ceiling and is still a long way from restoration. As Timothy thought about this, his resentment against Roland grew. Bring them to my study, Timothy ordered. After a brief hesitation, he decided to receive them in the palace anyway. No matter what, it would be rude to receive messengers in the basement. He was clueless as to why the Kingdom of Dawn would send messengers to the Kingdom of Grey Castle at this time, especially with no prior notification. Had it been one of the other 2 kingdoms instead, it would most certainly be a request for aid, either for food or materials to resist the winter cold. There was a saying among the nobility that people who made contact in summer were friends, while those who did in winter were enemies. It held true among all of the kingdoms, except for the Kingdom of Dawn. Although its territory was small, it did not lack in materials, and, in fact, it sold a large amount of food and cloth to the Kingdom of Grey Castle every year in exchange for perfumes and crystals. Timothy shook his head discreetly. He had many things to attend to and therefore intended to dismiss the messengers as early as possible. When he returned to his study, he saw that the 2 members of the emissary delegation had been waiting for a long time under the companion of Sir Bullet. Upon seeing His Majesty enter the room, they stood up and bowed. To the Honorable King of the Kingdom of Grey Castle, Wimbledon 4, the King of the Kingdom of Dawn sends his regards. Bring him my regards too. Timothy nodded inattentively. Have a seat. He noticed that the pair of messengers, which comprised of a man and a woman, was very young and looked rather alike. The family insignia on their chests was an antler scepter, and if he did not remember wrongly, this meant that they came from the illustrious Luashi family of the Kingdom of Dawn. What exactly is Mia forethinking? Why did he send these young UNS? Timothy felt rather curious. Nobles of this age were typically haughty and arrogant, and were vastly different from older nobles who would fight for every little bit of benefit on the negotiating table. Are you both members of the Zulu family? Timothy pointed to their chests. I once briefly met Duke Luashi. Indeed, Your Highness. The young man smiled. I'm Otto Luashi. This is my younger sister, Belinda Luashi. They're even siblings. Timothy raised his eyebrows. If that's the case, I don't have to beat around the bush with them. It's currently the massacre period of the months of demons. Why did the King of the Kingdom of Dawn send you here? Timothy took the lead and asked. I guess you are neither short of cotton and cloth, nor of wheat and bread. And of course, even if you met with a disaster, the aid that I can provide is very limited. You should know that the royal decree on the selection of crown prince has left my kingdom in a mess. Many places have come to a standstill, and just helping the refugees has stretched the city hall thin. It's very difficult for me to pull out more supplies. With regard to this, I express my deepest regrets. Otto felt his chest and said. However, Mia Ford did not send us here to request aid, but to respond to an even more dangerous threat. His words startled Timothy. What threat? The church, Your Highness, Belinda replied. Currently, the church's army has seized the kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart, and large numbers of refugees have swamped into the kingdom of Dawn. According to the information the refugees brought, the church's methods are abominable and in serious violation of the rules of engagement agreed among the nobility. Those who resist are either hanged or exiled, while only the nobles who agree to switch allegiance are allowed to live. This method intends to completely eliminate the noble class and bring the territories under the full control of the church, Otto spoke in a rather heavy tone. Mia Ford believes that the kingdom of Wolfheart won't be their last target. Given the critical situation that both our kingdoms are in, the church is likely to bring the flames of war to our lands in the coming year. Our king hopes that we can work together and fight back against the church. Are you sure that Wolfheart City has already been captured? After hearing from the other party, Timothy began to frown. 1,000 times sure, Your Highness. The two messengers nodded in unison. Timothy had caught wind of the church's aggressive war, but he did not expect that it would be able to seize two large kingdoms in such a short period of time. If the messengers were not lying, the strength displayed by the church was a little too frightening. Certainly, it was best to verify this matter with the Minister of Intelligence first. The early arrival of snow during the months of the demons had impeded his caravan's route, and thus he had not received messages from the kingdom of Wolfheart for a very long time. After a long silence, Timothy asked, "What's the specific plan?" Otto moistened his lips and pulled out a map underneath his arm. Spreading the map in front of Timothy, he said, "If the church sets off from Holy City and attacks the Kingdom of Dawn or the Kingdom of Grey Castle, then the other kingdom should lead an army towards the north and invade the Holy City of Hermes. Doing so will suppress the church's offensive and divide its troops." Is this an offensive-defensive agreement? Indeed, Your Highness, Otto replied. No matter the starting point is Cold Wind Ridge of the Kingdom of Grey Castle, or Northshire of the Kingdom of Dawn, it'll be possible to reach the Holy City of Hermes in a week's time. As long as our main forces are stationed in these two places, the church may decide to retreat wisely. It'll be a blessing to both kingdoms if we can prevent this war from happening. If that's the case, I might as well forget about buying pills from the church. Timothy thought silently. But without them, how am I supposed to drive Roland and Wimbledon out of the western region? Timothy understood that precautions had to be taken against the church. But he felt that it was best to first purchase the pills he needed and unify the entire kingdom of Grey Castle before he reached an agreement with the Kingdom of Dawn. This is a matter of great importance. I'll need to consult with my ministers before I decide. The two of you can stay in the palace while you wait for my decision. Sure, Your Highness. There's another thing I would like to ask. How much do you know about the situation in the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart? Did all of the information come from refugees by word of mouth? There are a few reports from spies, but not many. When the church sieged Broken Tooth Castle and Wolfheart City, it also sealed off the surrounding roads. That's why we don't know much about the progress of the battle, Otto replied. According to the refugees, the church used a terrifying siege weapon which demolished the walls of Wolfheart City in only one day. It was probably a snow powder weapon, which was possibly revealed from Garcia's side. Timothy gestured with his hands and asked, "I'm not interested in this. Have you heard of any news about the Black Sail Fleet or Garcia Wimbledon?" This. The two messengers exchanged glances before Belinda said cautiously, "We heard that when Garcia was fleeing from King's City together with the King of Wolfheart, she was struck by the church's arrows and perished." Garcia was with the King of Wolfheart? Timothy's heart skipped a beat. Was her body found? Not that we're aware of. Judging from the church's publicity after the siege, as well as the lack of news from the Kingdom of Wolfheart, it's highly unlikely that they managed to escape. Really? Timothy exhaled and felt a little relieved. Although there was a bit of regret, this was one of the few pieces of good news he had heard since winter arrived, and he hoped that the messengers were right. Okay then, you two can go and have a rest. As the messengers took their leave, a smile began to form on his face. Hear that, Roland Wimbledon? This is the kind of demise which, as a fellow insurgent, you'll end up in as well. Chapter 401, Winter in the Fjords. In the sea of the fjords lies Sleeping Island. The skyline turned a pale yellow as the last of the high-rise buildings was finally completed. Although the setting sun was not visible, one could still see a streak of golden light reflected on the sea's surface by the sunset glow that passed through the clouds. Only the harsh cold gusts of wind, which blew directly at one's face, gave away the fact that it was no longer autumn. And it's done. Lotus lifted up the scarf around her neck until her ears were also covered by the soft cotton. This will be our new home once the furniture and beds are moved in. Fantastic. Durat Kimshu clapped and said. That's a lot of houses built in half a month. And I thought Lady Tilly was exaggerating. Lady Tilly doesn't lie, Breeze added. Indeed, Durat stroked his thick double chin and said. If that's the case, I'm reassured about resettling my citizens over here. Oh, what's this? The merchant who came from the Crescent Moon Bay analyzed the groove-shaped parapet that was in the house. Bending his body, he even stuck his head in the hole to take a look inside. This is a warming device that I learned about in the western region. It's called a heated brick bed. Lotus explained. It's connected to the kitchen, and hence when a fire is started in the kitchen, this bed will also turn warm. Add a wooden plank on top and cover it with linen or straw, and you can use it as a bench or a bed. It'll be more comfortable than your typical furniture, especially in the current season. Interesting design, Durat said and glanced squarely at Lotus. If I wanted to hire you for the long term, how many gold royals would it cost? What, do you mean? Lotus was slightly astonished. Follow me to work in the Crescent Moon Bay. There remain several wastelands which have yet to be developed in my territory. Your abilities will prove extremely useful. Durat rubbed his hands and said. How many gold royals do I have to pay the sleeping spell in order for Lady Tilly to authorize you to follow me? Sorry, I've never thought of leaving. Your life over there will be much better than it is here, Durat interrupted quickly. You'll get to live in the same large compound as me, enjoy fine wine and cuisine from the Four Kingdoms every day, and have attendants accompanying you wherever you go. That's the ideal life that many people envision, and I'm giving it to you as long as you work for me. Besides, Lady Tilly has said that the requests of the sleeping spell must be fulfilled, and I'm able to afford your recruitment fees no matter how high it is. Lotus frowned. She was not unfamiliar with his kind of attitude. Although verbally, he said that he was hiring her, it felt to her more as though she was being bought. Just as she was about to bawl out a few sentences, Breeze gently tugged on her hand. Even though the requests must be fulfilled, it doesn't mean that it'll be accepted. There are some things that even witches can't do. Besides, all parties have to approve before an agreement can be made. You mean that money alone isn't enough? I've never seen a deal like this, Durat spoke with displeasure. Was what you said when you cast this Sleeping Island mere rhetoric to make fun of us? No one will believe or be interested in you if this goes on. I doubt so, someone responded from behind. There's only one witches' guild that offers rewards, whether it be in the fjords or the Four Kingdoms. If you don't come, there will be others. Who speaks? The merchant turned his head and received a rude shock. Why? Your Highness Thunder. I came up with some of the ideas for the regulations of the sleeping spell. Before a contract is signed, the consent of the employee has to take into consideration the possible risks associated with the tasks. They'll not be forced to venture into grave danger, Thunder said in a clear voice and laughed. Do you have an issue with this? No, this is definitely reasonable. Durat's facial expression restored to normal. Then, I'll still have to trouble you in the future, Miss Lotus. Phew. Lotus watched the merchant and his entourage make their departure, and sighed in relief. Thanks. No problem, I was just passing through. Thunder laughed. Didn't you follow Lady Tilly to the western region? Yes, but I came back early together with Honey and Breeze, because Sleeping Island needed to prepare supplies and houses for winter. She gave him a simple account of the matter. Have you completed your expedition? Ha ha ha, yes, it was an incredible and unimaginable trip. Thunder's eyes lit up as soon as she mentioned his expedition. This was the first time I saw different sea levels occurring at the same time. Our ship seemed as though it was flying. We didn't fall into the sea when we advanced past the cliffs that were formed by the waves. If I hadn't seen it myself, I absolutely wouldn't believe that such a strange sight could be real. Different sea levels? Lotus murmured. How could it be? The sea water ain't rocks. Wouldn't it flow downwards? I named it the Sea Line, and it's located to the northeast of the Shadow Islands. When we reached the top of a cliff, it would appear like a long line which we couldn't see the ends of, and the sea would seem to be divided into two distinct sections. He patted his chest excitedly. I can't wait to venture even further next time. It was indeed worthy of the most prominent explorer in the fjords that the first thing he talked about upon his return was regarding his adventures, and not regarding his daughter who was far away in the western region. Lotus shook her head helplessly as she watched him talk on and on. Before darkness fell and the temperature outdoors plunged, Lotus had already climbed early into the heated brick bed. This was the most relaxing moment of her day. For more than a month, she not only constructed a new batch of houses but also renovated the creaking houses of other witches. Crowding onto the heated brick bed with everyone else and chatting about her experiences in Border Town, the questions from her companions, which were born out of a mix of curiosity and envy, ensured that she did not get any sleep for half of the night. The conversation topic shifted to the birdbeak mushrooms. Her companions started to salivate when she mentioned how she prepared them. She would place the mushrooms in some butter and flip them a few times, then fry until both sides of the mushrooms were golden brown in color, and finally sprinkle a bit of salt on top to create a most delicious dish. I feel like eating this, Shadow exclaimed. After eating dried fish on board for a month, my mouth is full of a salty and fishy smell. Great, Molly could not help interrupting Lotus. If only I was the one whom Lady Tilly's elder brother invited. Hey, there are even more amazing things you haven't heard. Someone giggled. In the showers of Border Town, the water comes straight out of the wall, and the scented soap makes your whole body smell great after showering. There's really something like this? Shadow asked curiously. Of course, and I even brought one back. Lotus curled her lips upwards. But it has been used up. Don't talk about it. At least they got to experience it. I followed Lady Tilly to the western region and then immediately brought these girls back here. I didn't get to enjoy anything. Breeze bemoaned. As she listened to the witches' gabbling discussions, Lotus suddenly had a thought. If it was instead His Highness Roland Wimbledon who wanted to hire her long-term, would she have agreed? After contemplating for a while, she realized that she would not be able to refuse if it was indeed Roland. What an embarrassment. Lotus tucked herself inside her quilt and glanced left and right. Luckily, the lamp was already extinguished, or else someone might have realized what she was thinking about. However, when would Lady Tilly finally be able to accept His Highness Roland? It would be great if they could stay together forever. Lotus held the cloth tightly in her arms. If so, it would be good for me and the other witches, as we would all be able to live happily in Border Town. Chapter 402, Organizational Structure. At the beginning of the second month of winter, Berev walked into Roland's office, carrying a stack of books under his arms. As he walked up to Roland's table, a huge color painting on the table caught his attention. Is this a map of the entire western region? Not just the western region, Roland said, laughing. It also includes a portion of the barbarian land and the misty forest, especially this space over here. He pointed to an area in the northern part of the impassable mountain range. It was the fertile plains that Agatha had talked about. At present, the area that we've already discovered is equivalent to 3 western regions. If we manage to cultivate the land of this large space, we can resettle hundreds of thousands of people. In order to eliminate the threat that came from Devil's Town, he had sent Lightning and Maggie to comb through the area and draw up a map. Now that Maggie could carry Soraya while she did the drawing, more accurate maps could be drawn. Although the disappearance of the Devil's Camp was still a mystery, the good news was that there was no sign of another enemy camp within 200 kilometers of border town. In the barbarian land, there aren't only demonic beasts, but also scary enemies, like you said. Barrow's words came with a hint of hesitation. Won't it be too dangerous to cultivate the land towards the northwest? By that time, the First Army will most likely be equipped with the power to fight demons. Roland slowly swiveled his finger around the plains on the map. It won't be safe anywhere if we're unable to defeat these enemies. Ever since demon scouts were spotted in the misty forest, he knew that he could not conceal this information for long. In order to prevent the panic that could be brought about by a sudden revelation, he first disclosed the existence of demons to his top brass. Judging from the current situation, the reaction of the people were fairly normal. Of course, he had slightly downplayed the strength of the demons by asserting that they were of the same ilk as demonic hybrid beasts, while he did not divulge the history of the two battles of divine will. Roland knew that his kingdom could not remain on the mainland border forever if it wanted to be on par with the four kingdoms. Only the barbarian land, or should we say, the fertile plains, was a land area that was worthy of his governance. In fact, the area that had been explored was only a tiny fraction of the entire plains. One could imagine the vast amount of land that humans occupied during the Second Battle of Divine Will. He retracted his finger, then rolled up the map and placed it to one side. "Do you have any news to report?" "Yes, Your Highness." Barov nodded and then spread the books that were under his arms in front of the prince. "I've drawn up a plan for the city hall's expansion according to your demands." "Oh? I'll have a look." In order to cope with the rapid growth of territory after the establishment of the city, Roland utilized a futuristic classification of his government's functional departments, and thus set a new framework for management organizations of his time. Overall, the upper sector of the government was divided into four main branches, namely the City Hall, the military, the Security Bureau and the Witch Union. Under the expansion plan, the new City Hall would assume the role of the Cabinet or State Department, and would be the core institution of the entire territory. In time, the personnel would increase to approximately 500 people. Its 6 departments would be finance, foreign affairs, education, agriculture, industry and law, while new departments could be added at any time according to demand. Moreover, if, or when, the Kingdom of Grey Castle was reunified, all of the other cities could follow this template and set up corresponding lower sector institutions, and together they would be managed by the City Hall. In addition to its battle staff, the military also had independent production and medical departments that served as logistical safeguards. Every military division had a commander-in-chief who was responsible for specific combat matters, but the supreme authority of the military rested with Roland himself. The Security Bureau was a secret organization which hid in the dark. Its funds were not allocated by the City Hall, while its members were also not recorded in any dossier. Its primary functions were to monitor and ensure the security within the territory and handle issues of official corruption. Lastly, the Witch Union. Roland had thought hard about this organization but eventually decided that it would be a separate department, instead of sorting the witches into the other departments. This was because, for some of the witches, their abilities would increase dramatically after evolution, and then they would be able to work across multiple departments. For example, Anna and Soraya could both play important roles in industry, agriculture, military, and education. Another reason was that there would be times when a witch would not be assigned any work, and therefore, classifying them together could effectively avoid dampening their enthusiasm. This was a point that Scroll and Wendy had brought up to him. Roland hoped that in the future, the Witch Union would operate on its own, which included handling its membership, inspection and work allocation. "Are you really able to hire so many literate people?" After he finished reading the City Hall director's proposal, Roland raised his head and asked. A 500-person institution was considered enormous in this era. Plus, the requirement that every employee had to be literate would almost certainly be impossible to fulfill in other territories. Although the royal city of each kingdom might have sufficient literate people, these were in large part nobles who were too proud and arrogant to be willing to serve as apprentices. Add in the fresh batch of graduates and there shouldn't be a problem, Barav replied. According to the feedback from the recruitment notices, jobs in the city hall are the most popular. It seems that being a civil servant is popular everywhere. Roland arched his lips upwards uncontrollably. In that case, go ahead and recruit people according to this scheme. The next and final task is to formulate laws. Pass me the principal article that you mentioned the last time, and I'll have my apprentices complete the rest as fast as possible, the city hall director said in high spirits. It's called Basic Laws, Roland said and laughed. It appeared that enthusiastic model workers were not only confined to witches, this was a good sign for a new regime. Another thing, Your Highness, Barav said. If the city hall is expanded according to the plan, the current building may not be able to accommodate so many people. Can you want to build a new city hall? The prince nodded in agreement. For sure. I'll arrange Karl to see to it. In the eyes of the citizens, this was the face of the Lord. While they rarely had the chance to enter the castle, they would often settle matters in the city hall. Thus, a certain degree of splendor and style was necessary. If it was austere and unembellished, the people's confidence in him might erode. After Barav took his leave, Roland called his guards to bring in Prius Dessau, the knight from the Elk family. Roland had not seen him for half a year. The knight was visibly fatter and his face fuller than usual, while his cheeks even glowed a bright red. Life had certainly been good. Recently, there's been more eggs and poultry in the convenience market. This all your credit. Roland smiled. Your way of raising chickens and ducks must be great. Prius laughed, somewhat embarrassed. Without your support from the start, I couldn't have done any of this. Farming was not a smooth journey. When Prius first started, the foul plague even appeared and caused the death of many chickens. Roland simply thought of it as a good lesson and did not give up on him. Instead, the prince continued to buy baby chicks from the stronghold and passed them to him for raising. Presently, he had become an indispensable talent of the town's community. I plan to recruit you in the city hall under the agriculture department. Do you agree? Your Highness, you don't want me to continue raising chickens and ducks? Prius was slightly surprised. Of course not. You've been doing a great job, and therefore, I hope that you can bring more people into this business. Roland said encouragingly, soon, I plan to expand the scale of farming by more than 10 times. Then, you and your family won't be able to handle it alone. After you're recruited in the city hall, you can pass on your experience to more people and teach them how to farm. Given Lily's ability to eliminate bacteria and diseases, the most thorny problems of animal husbandry ceased to exist. Apart from chickens and ducks, large livestock such as cows and lambs were also within the prince's expansion plans. This is undoubtedly a noble job that's no less honorable than knighthood. The prince paused for a moment and then continued speaking. There'll be a day when eggs and poultry will be served on the dining tables of every household in the western region. And when people see these delicious foods, they'll all remember your name. What do you think? I'm willing to serve you. Prius Dessau clenched his fists and bowed respectfully. Chapter 403, Student and Teacher. Nana yawned loudly as she got off the bed. She glanced at the whiteness outside the window. Still, she could see nothing but snow. Reluctantly, she moved out of the warm bed and put on her thick winter coat. As she trudged out of the bedroom, she saw Aunt Alda tidying up the living room. Good morning, she muttered. Ah, little princess, you're awake. Alda smiled at her. Want breakfast? It's ready. Yes. Nana sat beside the dining table and ran her eyes around the room, but she did not see her father. Where's Daddy? Lord Pine went out early in the morning, Alda replied from the kitchen. He was carrying his silver shotgun. Indeed. Nana curled her lips upwards. He's probably gone to the city wall to practice shooting again. Ever since he fended off the demonic beasts with the flintlock, he has become enamored by this loud and booming weapon. Not only does he wipe a gun barrel every day, but also he'll go to the city wall to practice whenever he has time. Furthermore, he managed to apply for a specially made flintlock from His Highness using my healing abilities as a bargaining chip. It's all His Highness' fault for saying that long shotguns are the standard equipment for hunters, Nana thought. If Mummy's still around, Daddy probably won't go out all day long like this. Breakfast's here. Alda placed 2 steaming plates on the table in front of Nana. Fried eggs and white bread. Eat while they're hot. Thank you. Breakfast's normally prepared before Daddy leaves home. Only Aunt Alda would specially place it in hot water to keep it warm. If instead, Daddy took care of me, I'd be eating cold and hard eggs. Nana sighed uncontrollably. If only Aunt Alda could marry Daddy. But the young girl knew that this wish had little chance of happening. Alda was the family servant while Daddy was a noble of border town. As far as she understood, it was difficult for a commoner and a noble to get married. She devoured the delicious breakfast, wiped her mouth, and shouted, "I'm going to the medical center." Okay. Alda put down the broom she was holding and led Nana to the door. As she bent down and tied a scarf around Nana's neck, she said, "Be careful on the road, Miss Pine." "Yes, Aunt." White snowflakes greeted Nana as she made her way out of the house. This was her daily routine. In the morning, she would leave home for the medical center. She would treat the patients if there were any, or else, she would practice her abilities on animals. At noon, she would go to the castle to have lunch with Roland, while in the afternoon until night time, she would remain in the medical center, after which she would return home. She was the only witch who did not live in the castle. Although time in the medical center was boring, she persisted because she wanted the patients to receive treatment as quickly as possible. The smile and warmth of the townspeople also supported and pushed her on. "Lady Nana, good morning." "Miss Angel, going to the medical center again? Today's weather ain't good. Do take care of your body." "Miss Pine, have you eaten breakfast? Why not have a bowl of hot oatmeal that I just prepared?" Greetings like these continued incessantly whenever she walked in public. It was a stark contrast to a year ago. Her sisters claimed that she was currently the most popular witch in border town, even more popular than Anna. Nana wasn't concerned about a popularity contest, albeit she was happy with the current atmosphere. Every person whom she had treated before would greet her affectionately, and this filled her with a sense of achievement. Elder sister Anna was right, Nana thought. The only way to change people's prejudices was to face them adamantly. When she arrived at the medical center, the first army soldier who was manning the gate bowed and greeted her. "Hello, Miss Nana." "Good morning, are there patients today?" "Not at the moment," the soldier replied. "But your friends have come." "Friends?" She was surprised. Could it be Anna? As she thought of Anna, she excitedly ran up to the second floor and pushed open the door, only to find Mystery Moon, Hummingbird, and Lily idly lying on the table. On noticing her, the 3 of them immediately got up and surrounded her. "You 3. Ha, are you pleasantly surprised? We came all the way just to see you." Mystery Moon raised her arms and exclaimed. Mystery Moon suggested that instead of lazing about in the castle, it would be a good idea to come out for a walk, Hummingbird added. "You 2 may be free, but I'm certainly not. I still have many insect samples to observe." Lily, who was standing at the back, lamented. "Nana must be very busy as well. You think that she's like you? Is that so? Yesterday, I peeked and saw you dozing off in front of the microscope. You were obviously sick of your job." Mystery Moon shrugged her shoulders. "Nothing of that sort." Nana was slightly disappointed that it wasn't Anna who turned up, but she quickly buoyed up. At present, Anna was His Highness' busiest subordinate, and naturally, could not spend as much time with her as in the past. "No, I'm in fact very free," she replied, laughing. "Thank you, you 3. Ahem, since you say so, I shall remain behind to accompany you." Lily turned her head. It won't be a problem to observe the samples tomorrow. What are we gonna play? Hummingbird questioned. What else? Mystery Moon took out a pack of playing cards. Of course, this. Fight the Landlord may be interesting, but it's a 3-player game. No, not Fight the Landlord. She shook her head uncannily. A new game that's suitable for 4 players, where we compete to see who can show her cards the fastest. I learned it from Andrea's group only yesterday. The 3-player group of the Sleeping Island? Lily said, holding her forehead. You learn poorly from others, yet still choose to learn from this bunch. Had you used your energy to learn new knowledge from His Highness instead, you won't have made so little progress until now. This was also handed down by His Highness. Mystery Moon retorted. Why is it not considered part of His Highness' new knowledge? Other than you, there's probably no one in the Witch Union who thinks this way. Lily stared at her for a moment. I'd like to learn as well. Hummingbird mumbled softly. Nana watched the conversation going on and laughed uncontrollably. She felt like she was back to the carefree days when she attended Teacher Carl's academy. Under the company of the 3 witches, the morning time, which was usually boring, passed quickly. They then went to the castle for lunch together, after which Nana returned to the medical center alone. As she stepped into the hall, she saw someone unexpected. Carl Van Bate. Mr. Carl. Nana said in surprise. What brings you here? To see you. Carl smiled and gazed at her, and then said happily, You have grown up. Is that so? Nana lowered her head, as if embarrassed. I'm still a long way from Anna. Everyone's different. You have your strong points. He laughed. Watching you and Anna grow up, as well as observing the town's changes, it seems that I can no longer see the cracks. What cracks? Nana was confused. Nothing. I'm just spouting nonsense. Carl shook his head. I used to believe that the God had forsaken this world, but now, I feel that it continues to watch over us. Not a God, Nana corrected him. His Highness says that these are the fruits of human efforts. Weren't those residential communities built by you? But without an origin, nothing could have happened. At that time, when I thought that Anna was dead, and you somehow awakened as a witch, I was utterly flustered. It might have been a God who heard my prayers and answered my call. Carl said in a gentle voice. It brought us His Highness Roland. Chapter 404, The Journey to Magnetoelectricity. Ah. I envy Nana so much. Mystery Moon wiped her wet hair and drew her face close to Lily, who was sitting upright at the desk. Lily replied without even turning her head. You don't ask why I envy her? You'll soon fill me in anyway, Lily said, twitching her mouth. Damn it. Mystery Moon mumbled, but could not help saying in the end, didn't you see how the soldiers at the hospital and the townsmen nearby treat her? Saw it. Hello, Miss Nana, are you leaving, Miss Angel? Miss Pine, this is the wheat cake I made. I want to be treated like that, too. Mystery Moon pressed her face onto Lily's cheek, but was pushed away relentlessly. That's a return for her ability, Lily said without turning a hair. Didn't you notice that ever since the months of the demons, she's been staying at the hospital almost every day, waiting to treat the wounded? Half of the locals have received her treatment, and the rest are pretty much their families. You're exaggerating. Not really, Lily said with a sigh and put down the book in her hand. Although not everyone will fight against demonic beasts at the city wall, it's perfectly normal for townies to get injured, miners can hurt their toes by oars, kiln laborers can get burned. The same applies to the apprentices at the steam engine plants and the chemistry laboratory. She paused for a moment and said, His Highness once told me that Nana and I are the foundation of medical care in Border Town, one of us for internal medication and the other surgery. This allows the operation to remain at an intense level, while still make sure everyone is healthy without establishing a safety policy. However, in fact, I haven't done anything except epidemic prevention for new refugees. So you're feeling sour like me. Mystery Moon said, leaning over unyieldingly. No, I'm not. Lily fired. And stay away from me. You're interfering with my reading. Ah. Mystery Moon chickened and said, but I'm really envious of her. Then learn from Nana. Take the initiative to help every townie until they know you and get familiar with you. Then surely everybody will say hello to you wherever you go, said Lily, shrugging her shoulders. But I don't have an ability like Nana's, Mystery Moon said, frustrated. Then use your physical strength if not your ability, said Lily, mocking. Regardless, you've been there at the camps of the Witch Cooperation Association. You, rascal. Mystery Moon still nursed a grudge when she went to bed. She knew that Lily was right, but being inferior to the other witches chafed her pride. This was intolerable. She had gone through so much pain before finally finding an ideal place to settle down, and idling about all day was torture. Mystery Moon slept fitfully all night. She knocked on Roland's office door with dark circles below her eyes the following day. What's the matter? The prince asked in surprise. Were you bullied? By Lily. No, never mind. She leaned dramatically on Roland's desk and asked, Your Highness, didn't you say that I have great potential? Why is there no change in my ability yet? It really can't evolve unless I understand natural science theoretical foundation? I see, Roland said, trying in vain to suppress his laughter. Actually, I've been thinking about this problem, too. What problem? Didn't Agatha say that over 400 years ago, the witches at the Union experienced high awakening even without a comprehensive understanding of the world? Apart from basic practices, the rest will be a sudden enlightenment. This could be achieved by the observation of natural phenomena, or by an accidental flash of inspiration. Roland continued, however, the latter is apparently not comparable to the awakening inspired by systematic learning. Look at Agatha's magic power. She's not only the weakest one among the evolved witches, but she can't even compete with some of the ordinary witches such as Sylvie and Andrea. Doesn't matter, as long as it evolves. Mystery Moon's eyes were sparkling. You've got an idea? It may not work, the prince said, throwing up his hands, but it's worth a try. What do you know about magnetic forces? A force produced by the directional movement of electrons, which a magnetic field acts on the magnetic bodies and electric currents in it. That was copied from the book, he smiled and said. You memorized it well, but you probably don't understand it at all. Mystery Moon hesitated for a moment and nodded. You've seen lines of magnetic forces simulated by iron powder. You also know the direction of magnetic forces, and have seen the DC generator, too. So I think, you may not enable closed circuits to quickly cut lines of magnetic forces, yet you can change the magnetic field you form, thereby personally experiencing the transformation from magnetism to electricity. I don't quite follow you. The nature of the transformation from magnetism to electricity is the change in magnetic flux. If you want to change the magnetic flux in a constant magnetic field, the only way is to change the area, that is, to cut magnetic induction lines. The prince drew a diagram on the paper and said, what if the area remains constant? That'll be changing the magnetic field, which means changing the magnetic flux. Mystery Moon groped unsuccessfully for adequate words, failing because she didn't understand a word. The prince laughed and said, It's okay that you don't get it. You only need to do this, quickly release and withdraw your magnetic forces rather than continuously use your power. And then? Mystery Moon waited for Roland to continue. Nothing more. He shook his head. This is the only step. Huh? Just release and withdraw magnetic forces? Correct. If you can also change the direction of lines of magnetic forces, that would be perfect. For example, switch from the left hand to the right hand. The prince smiled and said, While you practice, I'll prepare a little toy for you. You'll know why when you get the hang of this method. 2 days later, Mystery Moon received what His Highness called a little toy. It was a square frame made of copper wires, the top of which was connected to a glass ball no bigger than half of a fist. Taking a closer look, she could see the copper wires were cut open in the ball and were connected by a much finer metal wire. An accompanying instruction manual read, "Hold the two ends of the square frame with both hands and practice. Note, be sure to draw the curtains and hide the stone of light." What the heck is that? She scratched her head and then did what the instruction manual instructed. It's practice no matter how I do it. Just ignore it, and it'll be fine. Mystery Moon learned that it was not hard to quickly release and withdraw her power, but changing the direction of magnetic forces delivered a blinding headache. Magnetic force was an essential power to her, and at first, this endeavor was akin to breathing with only one nostril at a time. Although Mystery Moon had restrained herself from playing poker games and been dutifully practicing her new skill for the last 2 days, the result lasted merely half a minute. She took a deep breath and summoned the magic power in her body. At first she felt nothing, but soon she saw a flash of red light. The metal wire in the glass ball turned orangey red, and the light became increasingly bright and intense. In a few seconds, the light was glaring. Mystery Moon almost could not believe her eyes. The inky dark room was lit by soft light much purer than the candle light, which she had never seen. She was still in a daze when the red light faded away, accompanied by a feeble popping sound before the darkness enveloped the room again. Chapter 405, Accompany. The next morning, Mystery Moon ran to the office in a hurry with bigger dark circles under her eyes. Why would the glass ball light up? It didn't work afterwards, no matter how hard I tried to apply my power. She could not wait to spit it all out after pushing open the door. That fast? The prince was a little surprised. He put down the quill, took the small object from Mystery Moon and said, "I thought it would take you 2 or 3 days." Mystery Moon bent over, propped up her chin on the edge of the desk, and asked with a blink, what on earth was glowing? That was electric light. The prince smiled and said, "You released lightning from the sky." Lightning? She could not help repeating the word in a quiet voice, and then shook her head. But it didn't look like it at all. This light was a red-orange color, and kept glowing. Lightning is always just a flash. The lightning lit the filament, making it glow continuously. The prince twisted the glass ball and took it off, then said, "It's fine that you don't understand it. I'll let you see the real electric light later." Mystery Moon's eyes were wide open. She gazed at Roland's every single movement, afraid of missing something. The prince drew the 2 copper wires closer and put the glass ball back again. "There you go. Now continue to practice." "That's it?" She took the wire frame, utterly disappointed. "That's right," the prince covered his mouth and said, "and don't forget to draw the curtains when practicing." Lily was sitting at the end of the bed reading Natural Science Theoretical Foundation when Mystery Moon returned to the bedroom. "Why are you up so early today?" she asked in surprise. "Since you're up, bring me breakfast. An omelet and bread, please. No porridge." "No, I won't bring breakfast for a traitor," Mystery Moon said with a grunt. She drew the curtains, and the room turned completely dark in an instant. "Hey, what are you doing?" Lily frowned and asked. "Practicing my ability." She threw herself on the floor and said, "Draw the curtains and hide the stone of light, that's His Highness' requirement." "Fine, fine," the little girl rolled her eyes and said, "I'll do my reading in the hall." "No, you can't." Mystery Moon hollered. "Why?" Lily darted her a look. "I can't read when I'm starving, and I have to stay with you here." Mystery Moon paused a moment. "I'll bring you breakfast. Can you stay here?" "What?" Lily asked with great interest. "Are you afraid of the dark?" "Not at all." She puffed out her cheeks and muttered after a while, "I just need company." She wanted somebody to witness her progress and be amazed at her ability. Even if she failed, she hoped someone would still comfort her, but she would rather carry these words to her grave than confide in Lily. "Okay then. I'll stay with you this time, since you sound so pathetic," Lily said with a yawn. "Breakfast, quick." Mystery Moon finally got ready to practice after reluctantly bringing the breakfast over. Lily swallowed the egg in content and asked, "What are you going to do? Magnetize the stuff in your hand?" "No, I'm going to let the magnetic forces in my hand change quickly. His Highness says that'll produce thunder and lightning." Lily was stunned. Thunder and lightning? "Yeah, I'm going to start." "Hold on," the little girl shouted, drawing closer to the door. "It's good now. Go ahead." Mystery Moon exhaled a long breath and mobilized her magic power as she had earlier. If this happened at the camps of the Witch Cooperation Association, Supervisor Kara would definitely scold her for such behavior. However, His Highness had intentionally replaced all the wares in the bedroom that contained iron, including iron nails, with copper-made items, making it easy for her to practice. She was generously treated in Border Town and would not allow herself to sit idle. Reminiscences of her experience in the town swarmed back upon her, image by image, as vivid as a merry-go-round. This time Mystery Moon found herself quickly in a ready state. The magic power danced between her hands with increased movement and growing intensity. Then she saw the electric light. Like a blue ghost revealing itself from layers of clouds, the light was transient and disappeared instantly. Nevertheless, she clearly saw a trace of electric light. It was like a tiny arc, spanning from one end of the copper wire to the other, bursting out gentle popping sounds. It was far from the end. Then came a second arc, and then a third. She noticed in dismay that every time the magnetic forces transformed, there was dazzling electric light springing up, the traces of which also changed correspondingly with its movements. With the direction of magnetic forces quickly switching back and forth, a bridge of blue and white gradually took shape between the two copper wires. "What's that?" Lily, who stood far away, asked, her eyes wide open. The electric light was insignificant compared with the red-orange blaze of yesterday, but it made Mystery Moon quiver in excitement. This was her first time witnessing her own ability. In comparison to the invisible lines of magnetic forces she could not understand in the slightest, the rhythm at which the electric arc danced and the direction of its movement were completely under her control. This was truly lightning created by her. Electricity generates magnetism, and vice versa. That's what it is. She sensed the power in her body had become more visible and clear. Mystery Moon got up on her feet and put the metal frame on the desk. She slowly released her hands to let the magic power die down, but the ends of the copper wires were still glittering, like flickering stars in the darkness from a far distance. She now had a better understanding of these words. In other words, electricity is magnetism, and vice versa. Roland kneaded his sore neck with a quill between his teeth. "Do you need a hand?" Nightingale's voice popped up by his ears. "Ah, thank you," he nodded slightly and said. Nightingale thus laid her two fair hands on Roland's shoulders and started to massage his neck with just the right amount of strength. Roland half closed his eyes, enjoying this moment of serenity. In order to draft the first code of the town, which would later serve as the basic laws of all the primary laws, he had been up earlier than even the guards for the past 3 days. It wasn't until today that he finally finished the draft. As Roland had no knowledge of the laws, he could only jot down some 10 articles in plain language based on his understanding of the system, which was no longer than 2 pages altogether. Nonetheless, these articles contained ideas and ideology from the New World. He believed this code would enable him to carry out a brand new system which was entirely different from the ancient feudal system across the whole continent while expanding his territory. With this code as its base, his new kingdom would indubitably distinguish itself from the others. "Your Highness." The office door was suddenly flung open. Mystery Moon rushed in with the copper wire frame in her hand, shouting, "I finally got it." Roland opened his eyes, and saw the girl withdraw her hands and put the little toy on the desk. "Look!" She did not touch the wire frame, but there was still an arc of light where the copper wires were cut open. Looking at this incredible scene, Roland could not help dropping his jaw. The quill slid off the corner of his mouth and fell on the floor. Chapter 406, The Limitation of Magic Power. What did I just see? A self-generating system of electricity that doesn't need an external energy supply. Mystery Moon's ability is an attaching type of magic, so the answer is clear. She added a brand new property to the metal frame, and her magic power acts as the energy supply, Roland mused to himself. How did you manage to do that? Roland asked aloud. When you said that there's an intertwining relationship between electricity and magnetism, and that they're indivisible, I wondered if I could make the objects generate lightning by magnetizing them. I tried to add a constantly changing magnetic forces to the copper wires because you've said creating electricity requires changes in magnetic forces. Then it turned out this way, Mystery Moon answered cautiously, her eyes sparkling with expectation. That's why. Changes in electric currents do produce magnetic fields, but magnetic fields only generate electricity under certain circumstances. It requires both closed circuits and changes in magnetic flux. Changes in the magnetic area and magnetic forces both need external energy supply. Mystery Moon's new ability has replaced an energy supply with the self-changing magnetic force, the prince concluded. Roland would have thought it was a perpetual motion machine prototype if he saw it in modern times. Yet here in this world, he understood that powers of witches could not be judged by common sense of his time. The magnetic property added to the objects might not be produced by magnetic poles, just as the black fire was not natural fire. They were tangible forms of the magic power. He could only wonder whether Mystery Moon had noticed any magnetic force change in objects to which she attached her magic power. When Roland asked her about it, she nodded and then shook her head. When I was in the Witch Cooperation Association, I once wanted to change the magnetism of objects according to my will. To avoid causing my sisters any trouble, I tried to make the objects less magnetic when they were not in use. However, it didn't work. Their magnetic force remained the same. I thought it was impossible, so I gave up on it, she said. Just as I expected, Roland thought. He cocked his head towards Nightingale and said, the form of her magic power. They have been united. Nightingale stepped out of her mist and smiled. The two are now one. Mystery Moon gasped, did I really? Yes, you did. Your ability has evolved. Roland confirmed. Only a long-term and relentless dedication of practice can lead to enlightenment and evolution that fast. You did a great job. From now on, you'll be the 6th evolved witch in the Witch Union. Congratulations. Nightingale went to Mystery Moon and patted her head, smiling. Now, am I able to do more for your highness? She asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Yes, countless things, Roland smiled and said. As I've told you before, you've got great potential. But first, go rest. You have dark circles as huge as fists around your eyes. I'll test your ability in the afternoon. Yes, she nodded vigorously. After Mystery Moon left the office, Nightingale purposefully shut the door and turned her attention to Roland. Ignoring her regular perchy at either Roland's desk or the French window, she drew close to him. Grasping his shoulders and leaning in to speak, she stood so close that strands of her fair hair tickled his face. He felt his heart beating violently at the sight of her bright eyes and soft, red lips. What's going on? Is she asking for it in broad daylight? Tell me the method. These were not the words that the prince had expected to hear from Nightingale. Wait, what's this have to do with anything? What method? He asked. The method to evolve without reading Natural Science Theoretical Foundation, she said excitedly. I can tell from Mystery Moon's grades that she doesn't understand the contents of the book, but you taught her how to evolve and gain a new ability. What should I do? Practice with little toys as well? She is asking for the evolvement method. What a pity, no, a relief. Roland thought and cleared his throat, putting himself together. I'm afraid your ability won't evolve through a sudden flash of enlightenment, he said. Why not? According to Agatha, only observing natural phenomena related to your ability can provoke an evolvement. Your mist is just too incredible for me to understand, let alone guide you to learn about it. Roland explained. Maybe the only method for you to develop your magic power is a sound understanding of natural science, physics, and even advanced mathematics. Nightingale's face fell. She feebly walked to the couch and sank back into it, feeling as if her body was hollowed out. After lunch, Roland spent the whole afternoon conducting a comprehensive test on Mystery Moon's new ability. He named it Variable Magnetic Force. It could be applied to any object like her magnetizing ability, and it would create periodic variation based on the magic power she initially conjured. However, as far as insulators, no electricity would be generated. Roland determined that Mystery Moon's magic power was the weakest of the evolved witches. She could only light up 2 magic stones embedded in the sigil of God's will, half a stone less than even Maggie. Unfortunately, the attaching type magic ability required a vast amount of magic power. The greater and longer variations in magnetic forces, the greater demand for magic power. After a series of tests, Roland found that Mystery Moon's new ability could serve as a stable battery, but it was far from sufficient to drive a large electric motor or power a steam engine. He tested her ability by transforming an old DC motor, initially used for the electrolysis of water, into an electric motor, and the result was disappointing. The motor, which consumed all of Mystery Moon's magic power to add a magnetic force, could only work half-day. That meant her new ability could not practically be used as a source power. Roland didn't tell Mystery Moon the bad results. Instead, he encouraged her to keep studying and practicing her new ability, because she was fragile and he feared bad news would be devastating. Besides, he knew that ability evolvement was not a sudden transformation, but a metamorphosis through learning. Roland remembered something he had heard from Agatha, the method to jointly produce Stone of Light. He thought, if there is a witch who can control or transfer magic power, Mystery Moon's power limitation won't be a problem anymore. In the evening, he went to talk to Tilly Wimbledon. An assistant witch with a controlling type of magic, she said after hearing the prince's idea. She thought for a while and answered, "No witch of the Sleeping Island has that kind of ability." "Really?" he asked, heaving a sigh. "It seems that Mystery Moon has to depend on herself to improve." Yet what Tilly said next cheered him. "However, I know where you can find the witch you want.